Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. I've been accused of being good at connecting dots, or people, or both, I guess. We can chalk it up to maybe pathological curiosity. And I get excited by new ideas and new tech, and I love to ask the question, wouldn't it be great if? Like when OpenAI rolled out its custom GPTs last year, I asked, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could create custom GPTs that can talk? And I'm air quoting talk here, talk like our executives. Then we would be able to draft content in their voice and style. Oh, and then we could grab topics from Talkwalker and plug them into GPTs and see what they'd say. And then we'd have a treasure trove of ideas for social posts. Oh, and then what if we could use them to pressure test fast ideas and so on? And I think you get the point. Well, it's one thing to have the ideas, connect a few dots here and there, and it's an entirely different thing to actually make them happen. You need discipline, focus, time to test and learn, patience, a simultaneously analytical and curious mind, people to believe in you and support you as you go through all these efforts. And it also helps to have a love of process, to get a thrill from a good workflow, to be the type of person who spends hours in a template library for fun. Well, my guest today is all the above and much, much more. Like me, she's a connector, a decades-long PR and marketing pro with a love for technology and how it can elevate our profession. But she's also a successful agency CEO, one of the most trusted voices in social media strategy for PR, and now has been at the leading edge of incorporating AI in novel, practical, and ethical ways to solve real business problems. A truly creative and curious thinker, she's held leadership positions within the Public Relations Society of America, the PRSA, has authored countless articles and co-authored at least one book with me, the most amazing marketing book ever, I might add. She's the founder of the active social media Breakfast of Houston and the CEO of Zoetica. Please welcome to the show, my friend, Kami Huyse. Kami, it's good to see you.
Dan, it's so great to see you.
What's up?
What's up?
Man, I love it. I love it when I have a real friend on the show. Not that all my guests are friends and they're wonderful people, but you and I know each other. And, not for too long. We've only known each other a few years. The book experience is one of those things. But I'm really surprised that we've only known each other for a few years because, once we started playing the name game, it turns out that those dots I was mentioning, those people connections, are just one dot away for you and I. And, running in very similar, parallel, overlapping circles, but never having connected until about a couple of years ago, thanks to our involvement with, and my listeners will get bored of me saying this, the Rise community, and the wonderful Mark Schaefer, who has introduced us. But, we've become good friends. We have so many things in common. And I just love the work you're doing. And especially, we'll get into the AI stuff because when I say you're blazing territory that most people can't even imagine or conceptualize, I'm not lying. It's true. And I've seen it firsthand. So I do want to get into that. But first, Kami, welcome. And I want to, give you a few minutes. If you could just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what Zoetica does and, where, what your main areas of concern are at the moment.
Thanks, Dan. I'm so glad to be here. And hopefully, our conversation can help people see things differently than they do. That's what I love to do. I call myself a lazy entrepreneur in a sense because
I love that.
What I've always done is I look at a problem that's in front of me and I try to figure out a way to do it more efficiently and different. Way back when I actually worked at MHI, which was Manufactured Housing Institute, this is many years ago now. I've been in this business almost 30 years. I started with that kind of concept around digitizing our media inside of the organization. So going all the way from that, looking at all these slides, we had all these slides and large format slides, and I was putting them into FedEx packages and sending them out to members, and they were sending them back to me. And somewhere along the line, I said, why aren't we just scanning all these into a digital media and then letting people do that? And we turned something that was really kind of what I call a PITA into a profit center for the association. So, I've done this since the very beginning. How can we take something and flip it. So at Zoetica, which is where I'm at now, we really look at the problems of our customers and try to solve them. Obviously, social media has been a huge part of what we do in the sense of community building and that kind of thing. But one of the reasons I really focus in on communities, well, two. Number one is because I believe that this is the only thing that's persistent across all of this. So I've been doing social media management for about 15 years now of my 30-year career. So I started really early. I've always been a forward-leaning person, and we did some of the first social media campaigns for big brands that you would know. So we did those social media campaigns early because we look at solving problems with current technology. And to me, AI is just a extension of that, right?
Yeah.
We have a current technology that's coming up, and I look at these technologies and think, how can I practically apply this to the craft? Like how can we not just to do it. I don't do AI to do AI. I do AI to solve specific problems. And I think that's really where I come from, is how can I solve these specific problems? Because otherwise you're just kind of spinning your wheels. I mean, it's fun to go out and play. But for example, custom GPTs, I wasn't really building those until recently, because until we got ChatGPT 4.0 and then everybody was opened up to these GPTs, I didn't love the idea of creating a GPT for a minority of people that could use it, because you had to be a member to use them. So why would I make a forward public-facing GPT unless it was accessible? So I have to think about these things, like what is worth the time and what isn't. So anyway, I know that's not really exactly what you asked, but that's what I'm doing.
Fine.
That's what I'm interested in right
now.
We
don't have rules on the show, so you can go whatever direction you want. As you know, as a PR professional, as someone who's done this kind of stuff before, what do they always tell us? You don't have to ask. You don't have to answer the question that's asked.
Bridging, because beautiful.
You bridge, and you own the conversation, not the interviewer. I love that when it's true. But on this show, we really don't have any rules. It's just other than we need to have a decent conversation, and I don't think that's going to be a problem. I love what you said. There's a couple things in there that just are already threatening to derail my original intent for the conversation, but that's fine. And like you said, I love this thing that you said that about being a lazy entrepreneur, and people laugh when I say, it's the lazy people that make the world go round. And, they say, well, why do you do all these things? I said, because I'm lazy. But I'm like working 14 hours a day, or, I'm either or working 10, 12 hours, and then I'm taking a couple extra hours to get up to speed on what's happening in AI. Thanks to Rise, I'm able to go and pick up what's going on. It's been the best source of information that I've ever seen, bar none. All I need is a Frank Prendergast or a Tyler Stambaugh near me, and I get it. Or Brian Piper, just they get it and they share everything and keeps me up to speed. So I'm doing that. And then I'm experimenting with custom GPTs, which, by the way, I pretty much created just for myself. I never thought of the public facing part of that. It's an interesting point. But because I'm lazy, because I want to generate a lot of content fast, quickly. And I know that on the other end, I'm going to have to do a lot of editing and fixing, but it sure beats all the time I'm going to spend staring at a page and sweating. Right. So I'm looking for those shortcuts, and AI is is like, if nothing else, it's like one of those signposts in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. It's like, for those of us who are old enough to remember these things, this way to Albuquerque. And I think that's what, that's one of the things AI is. It's like, shortcut to Albuquerque. You just follow this sign and you're going to get there faster. With a lot of detours along the way for those of us who get distracted by bells and whistles like me, But you said, I love that. That's a lazy entrepreneur. And with another thing that you said, which is an important topic, is about how you experienced early on, basically this digitalization, digital transformation, where you're packing things into FedEx envelopes and shipping them, and just, hey, wouldn't it make more sense if we could do it in a quicker, easier way and just put everything, in digital format, going back in the day when you're going from brochure to website, same thing, right? I feel like the entrance into our profession or maybe even to any profession, ours, marketing, anything, are going to miss out a lot by not having those experiences. Like they're transformed already for the most part. I'm sure that there will be another version of that, right? I'm sure it's going to continue to accelerate in different ways. But there was something about that, about taking, like, getting your hands dirty with newsprint, and pasting it into binders versus, now it's just click, cut, paste. I don't know. I mean, I think maybe it's just nostalgia. But
yeah,
I think
there's
AI
a lot of
gonna,
nostalgia there for sure. And like when I was in college, I was on the student newspaper, and we would cut, we would type up our stories and we'd cut them out. We'd put them through a wax machine and then like roll them onto a page for
oh my
our
God.
printing. No, I mean, this is how
Yeah.
I've been around a long time, guys. A lot of people think I'm a young chick, but I'm not.
Yeah. Well,
The truth is that I do believe that this current generation is also going to have their moment. I
yeah.
don't think that just because they didn't have our experiences, that their experiences aren't just as important and
Yeah.
valid. So one of the things that I think is really important is developing your as a Marcom professional, developing your entrepreneurial mindset. So
Yeah.
what is it that you are doing? You are trying to launch new ideas into a difficult space. And that's especially if you're in corporate. I mean, that is extremely important for you to be able to put together a use case and get that out there in a way that it's going to be accepted. So it takes a lot of brain power to do that. And I still think that's the human part. Like the AI can't do that for you. It absolutely cannot. So one of the things that I think is really important is spending time understanding the medium, which I call the AI medium. I talk a lot about AI recipes versus AI prompts, because to
Yep.
me, and I've been talking about that for about over a year, AI recipes versus prompts, because the prompts are changing anyway. We were talking about this even yesterday. We were talking about we are going to be able just to open up our phone, and we already can, and just talk to the AI and conversate. That's the wrong word. Have a
I like it.
conversation with the AI. And that is going to help us. And again, I already am doing that with Google, right? Hey, Google,
Mhm.
and it comes in and it helps me out. By the way, Google just responded.
Always does.
So I'm just saying that we are going to be like that with AI. We're going to have
Yep.
conversations with AI. And so we need to start to think about how to elevate those conversations.
Mhm.
What questions do we need to be asking? We need to ask better questions. That's where the training comes in. And that's what I love, by the way. That's just my joy and love, is to work with communicators to get them up to speed on that. Both my clients and also I also have a mastermind for PR consultants and coaches to help them with this. So I'm trying to um, train myself and train others on how to really bring AI to the table, if you want, for every
Yeah.
single conversation. Like, so how can we do this? And how can we do this? And what's the right tool for that? And that's the questions I'm asking right now. And then I'm putting them out in like my live streams and all the things that I'm doing. I'm trying to, teach or learn and teach. That's what I always have had. I've done this my
Mhm.
whole career. I learn and then I teach. I learn and I teach. So
Yeah.
I think that's really important right now for all of us as Marcom professionals.
Yeah. Learn, teach. That's the secret to learning, continuing to learn. You don't learn. You don't learn something until you're able to teach it, is what they say. I've been doing a lot of AI training on I think what we would air quote call the basics these days, but I don't even know if the basics are basic, anymore. I think there's, in the bubble that we live in, it's basic, but for most people, it's still quite advanced. The skills are not advanced. The mindset is a whole different issue. And then, understanding that you're not dealing with, something that is like Word or Excel. It's not like it's not just a typical like software as a service platform. It is, I don't even call it a technology when I talk to people about it. I just call it some other thing. And that has to be the foundation to moving forward with AI. And I like what you mean with. I like what you're saying about helping people to kind of see it from that solution standpoint. Like how's it? Like what are we practically going to do. That's the approach that we need to take. And I think answering those questions or backing in from the use case approach is what I mean. So like when we think about the practical applications of AI, we think about like, how people should be approaching it. Those two words, use case, I think are maybe the most important two words right now as we move forward. You talked about, how prompting it's recipes versus prompts. I totally agree. I like to think of prompts as just recorded snippets of conversation that work, and or game instructions almost. It's just a replicable kind of pattern in some ways, or dare I say a template that you can keep using. But it's really the use case that comes out of that where you get the value of the recipe, or you don't know if it tastes good until you cook it, and it's just getting there is maybe the thing that new entrants to the profession are going to be kind of dealing with. I'm sorry, I keep rambling because there's something that I want to get to here, and that is you Ethan Mollicked me a bit there when you said invite AI to the table.
I did a little bit. I did.
I just turned his name into a verb. I might be the first person to do that.
You caught that. Yes.
But yeah, inviting AI to the table. I don't think we're going to need to invite AI to the table anymore, or for that much longer, because AI is not only at the table, but it's like part of the wood or steel or whatever the table is made of now. So look at Adobe. Look what Adobe's doing with the Acrobat. You got the button. Mark calls it the button. Mark Schaefer calls it the button. Or maybe that's Ethan Mollick too. Ethan Mollick calls it the button. Mark Schaefer says.
So you back up real quick. You're talking
Mm-hmm.
about Ethan Mollick. You better tell him who he is.
Ethan Mollick, Wharton professor and genius, AI genius, has done more with the area of prompting and trying to understand the kind of the limits or lack of limits of what you can do with generative AI than anybody else, I think, out there, as far as I know. Just wrote a book called Co-Intelligence, which is tremendously important. It's not a technical manual or manifesto. It is a guideline to principles of how to interact with AI and where it might be going. The first principle was invite AI to the table. Right. The second principle is always like be the human in the loop, or keep the human in the loop. I'm not going to quote him perfectly.
Be the
here.
human in the loop is
be
the
the
third,
human in the loop.
second one.
The second,
yeah.
Right? And the third one is
treat AI
like a person. Oh, you got him in front of you. Treat AI like a person.
I do.
And the fourth one is basically that this is the worst AI you're ever going to see. So AI is always going to get better. Yeah.
I do want to back up to the treat AI like a person, but tell it what kind of person it is, which is really part of it too. So one of the things I talked about in our last conversation is that we have to ask better questions.
Yes.
One of the things I do every time when I'm interacting with AI is I ask a lot of questions. I think people are used to going to a Google search and searching and and we've been trained to get as specific as possible about what we're asking for to get what we need. And I think we're pretty good at it. I mean, Google searching is just something we've learned to do, right?
That's the mindset that I'm talking about. That's the first kind of physical manifestation of that mindset that I try to knock out at the very beginning of any one of those trainings. Sorry for interrupting. Go on.
No, you're totally good. So ask better questions. But I'm going to go back to my food analogy. So you have the home cook and you have the chef. What's the difference between the home cook and the chef? It's the ingredients. It's the special touches. It's the understanding of that. And so we're really working to try to go with AI from being the home cook AI to the chef AI. And it takes a little bit of effort on that part. One of the parts that really has worked for me is that after I go through an entire conversation, sometimes it takes a lot of work to get the AI where you want it to go. Yeah. At the end of it, or even at the beginning of it, I might ask it, I want you to do this. What would be the best things for me to give you to get this accomplished, whatever the task is. I'll ask the AI what it wants from me in order to do what I'm asking it to do. After we're done, if it takes me a lot of effort to get to a certain point, I'll say, how could I have gotten to this quicker with a how could have I gotten to this quicker with a prompt? Like, what
Ooh,
prompt would you give me to get to the result we got together more quickly?
I
It's
love
like
that.
it's one of the best little secret weapons I use all the time. And then I can take that prompt and I can teach it to others, and I have. So I am usually, when you get a prompt from me or a recipe, it has been well simmered, cooked, tested. It's been in the test kitchen. And we
Yeah,
have to put and by the way, these recipes might not work a year from now, that you may need new ones. So you're going
right.
to have to consistently test them and upgrade them. So think about being a baker who makes bread. Say you're a sourdough baker. My mother got really into sourdough for a while, and this is like a huge thing, like people sharing their batches and coming up with the best, starter batch, and and passing that down through the generations to the next starter batches. I mean, this is really what these AI recipes are. We need recipes versus like direct
Hmm.
things, because that's why I say don't buy like 100,000 prompts
No,
for,
never.
$27, because I mean, the prompts are fine. Probably you'll catch a few out of there. I'm not saying they're worthless. I'm just saying that in the end of the day, it's much better if you learn how to do it yourself. And so
Yeah.
if you could get just a little bit of direction and then become that cook. If you don't want to be the cook, I get it. You don't want to be the chef. Maybe somebody in your team is the chef,
Hmm.
and you work with them on that and get them the education they need to
Yep.
become that chef. That's definitely something I'm leaning into right now heavily, is how to train the next generation to use these AI tools in a strategic way. And that, I think, is what I'm very good at, is strategy. I've
Yeah.
always been good at looking at what's coming, what's next, what do we need to do to like shift into the marketplace so that we take advantage of something. So that strategy piece is huge. It always has been, it always will be. I don't care what kind of technology they throw at you. You have to learn where to spend your time and where your time is not well spent. And that's strategy.
Which is why you are a trending communicator, by the way. Um, that is the name of my show, and that's why you're here. It's really that forward looking at how these technologies, for lack of a better word, but really how the trends that are affecting our profession, communicators, what's that going to mean to the future. I do want to kind of ask a little bit more about this whole, this chef versus home cook analogy, because if you tie it back to what Ethan calls the button and what Mark calls AI will come to you, like the idea that AI it's already embedded in so many things, but in any application these days, any software application, they're just adding more AI capabilities. I mentioned Adobe. Just you open up a PDF and in Acrobat, and you have the summarize this document thing here. Copilot's like that. Google's product is like that. Where it's in the mix, and it takes a lot of the magic out of the prompting. It doesn't mean you can't prompt, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, but it means that if you were not going to prompt in the first place, or if you were not kind of leaning in that direction, well, now you don't have to. It's a lazy solution. But I feel like there's going to be, I don't think prompting is going to go away. I think that the necessity for it might decrease. But I do think you're going to see a difference between the chefs and the home cooks, in that there's going to be only a few chefs after a little while, because people stop working on the prompting. It'd be like, oh, it's already in Copilot. GPT 4.440, letter O, I think already has contextual understanding capabilities, so that as you prompt, it sort of already starts to understand its role. And as the memory improves, I suppose, of the things that you're asking and the kind of questions you continue to ask, the AI just adjusts. It starts to understand what you want it to be, without even telling it in the first place the kind of person it needs to be. But it's still more effective to tell it the kind of person it needs to be in the first place. Like it's far better to do it that way. So, ultimately, AI is coming to you. AI is coming to everybody. It's in everything. Do you have to learn how to prompt? No, probably not. But right now in our profession, certainly for the next year or two, maybe, in any profession really, being able to open up any of the AI apps and go back to that original question I asked, which is, wouldn't it be great if, right? If you say, hey, if you look at the empty screen, you say, wouldn't it be great if? And then the next part of that question becomes the core of your prompt. Like, wouldn't it be great if I could design a dashboard for my leadership that would show the real value that PR professionals give to the organization? Okay. Act as a data scientist and PR expert who has years of experience in corporate environments. What should I do to design a dashboard to talk to my executives?
What should that include?
What should that include?
Yeah.
And that kicks off the conversation, and it has to be a conversation. I love Chris Penn's work that he's doing with his almost timely news. And, he was in the Rise community giving us having a discussion recently, but, his framework for prompting is fantastic. The RACE framework, role, action, context, execute. That's kind of, almost baseline these days, but people don't think about it. But his power questions to keep asking, for me, as somebody who talks for a living, essentially, and tells stories, I mean, asking more questions is never a problem, but I suppose that it's good to give people the kind of nudge, hey, this is the time where you would ask another question. If you were talking to a person, wouldn't you ask another question right now? And when I train people, or when I talk to my team about it, I just always use the word interrogate, and could be a harsh word if you think about it in some ways, but no, interrogate it. Like ask it, interview it, interrogate, iterate, I words. Do it.
Yeah,
that's the way you do it.
I love that so much. And I love that you said that, a person needs to be relentlessly curious, because I think that's really part of it. That's what you said you are. And I think that's right.
Yeah.
And you have to notice things, and the way that you notice things is that you prime your brain to notice them. So we have something called the reticular activating system. It's right here in your brain.
Good here. Mm-hmm.
And that reticular activating system is what tells your brain what to notice and what not to notice. So it's the thing then in your brain that when you buy your new car, you see everybody driving that new car. It's how you train your brain to look. And so one of the ways you train your brain to look for these things and to understand them is to tell yourself what you're trying to accomplish. So, if you're trying to accomplish a certain goal with AI, talk about that to yourself. Like, okay, when I'm trying to imagine here, by the way, I've always talked to myself, which may be a good thing, but in this case, because I think that's kind of what you're doing when you're talking to AI. It's like you're talking to yourself, right? My husband's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to myself. Talking to myself."
What are you mumbling? My wife.
What are you mumbling about over there? So I think that's really, really important. And again, let me bring it back to my baking analogies.
Yeah.
These days, you're right that these tools are going to be baked into all of our tools that we use. I mean, I've seen it everywhere. All of the tools are adding it. Canva has it. Adobe has it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they charge you a little extra for it, so you may or may not be using it. Whatever, but it's the difference between using a boxed cake mix and creating a cake from scratch.
Yeah.
But then there was this other movement that came along called the almost homemade movement, where you take the box cake and you add a little spice in there of your own. So what does that look like inside of the tools that you use? I think that's really going to be one of the most important questions that we have here. What is the almost homemade solution? So maybe you will never, completely go all the way from scratch like I have and that Dan has, and, play with this because you maybe just don't love it as much as we do or care as much. And I get it. Yep. It takes a lot of time and brain power. I get it. And you have other things to accomplish as a Marcom professional. We have, deadlines and we have things to do and so on. So maybe that's just not your mindset. But what if you could think about that little bit of spice that you can add so that you're not just taking what the box gives you. You're putting a little bit in of what you're trying to accomplish to make it very specific to your brand. So I talk a lot about the human-centric AI. I do an entire speech about it. And I talk about this being that the human elements, because everything can be perfect now, like you can
Mhm.
write perfect copy and you can write perfect this and perfect that. Already I see the posts coming up that are like, all of these words, I'm sick of them because
Mhm.
that's, it seems like that's all that AI pumps
Yeah,
out are these words. I do think that some of those words are very specific to those people. By the way, I think the AI is like, it's learning their style
that's
and
right.
then spitting it back. So my point is, how do we have a pattern interrupt? I'll tell you how. You throw in the imperfect human. That's how. You
Ooh.
tell imperfect stories. You talk about being a lazy entrepreneur. These are pattern interrupts that AI won't come up with on its own. So I feel like that's really where we're headed here, is that we need to think about what can we bring to the table that is like a spice of human while understanding fully the AI and using it fully. So not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as we always said, but using the AI for what it's good for and throwing in your own spice. And I think AI is a lot like a very intelligent, like graduating college toddler.
Yeah,
Like you've seen these like small kids that all of a sudden they're going to college, they're 10 years old because they're just so smart. I mean, that's AI. It doesn't have a
yeah.
whole lot of sense, though.
That
There's
has no
not any
sense. The,
common
the, o-
sense.
well, the only sense it has is that it wants to please. It doesn't have any sense. It doesn't know anything. It's a big pattern recognition machine, right? I mean, I guess people will argue it does know things, whatever. That's completely out of my zone for the
Pay
moment.
grade.
Well,
It's
you
way
know,
above my pay grade.
yeah, I mean, I'll leave it to the scientists who are struggling with the singularity to think about that. But in in our case, when we're talking about the AI mindset, and so first of all, the imperfect human. When people start to talk about, well, AI is going to put me out of work or put me out of a job, uh, I don't I don't think that they're understanding that the flaws are the perfections. The flaws are what makes something interesting. You don't buy, I mean, maybe you do try to find a flawless diamond, but the flawless diamond doesn't quite have the same kind of sparkle or light play that one with a slight flaw somewhere does. It's the slight flaw makes it unique and interesting. And I think it's going to be the same thing. I love that. I've written that down and circled it 7 times, the imperfect human, because that could be the secret solution to people who are worried about where they're going with AI. But that,
And I
that
know
being,
I
yeah.
know your listeners can't hear us, but like
Mhm.
I don't or see us. I have a
Mhm.
shirt and I didn't wear it today, but that says perfectly imperfect. I wear it
Mhm.
a lot out and when I speak to I've been using the perfectly imperfect shirt. Here's my point is that this imperfect human is so important, but I also don't do the job of pulling slides out of a binder and putting them into FedEx packages anymore.
Yeah,
Do you know what I'm
of
trying to
course.
say? So yeah, you aren't going to do the job necessarily that you do right now as you do it. But if you want to stay relevant, you need to
Mhm.
start thinking about how you can apply these concepts to your job
Yeah.
and bring the thing that you are great at. Like you started really kindly, Dan, talking about what you think I'm great at. But every person listening today is great at something. They're great at something. You're
Yeah.
great at something out there. This is for you, whoever you are. I know there's somebody
Mhm.
listening that said this is for you. You are amazing at something, and you need to really lean into what that is. And if you don't know what that is, take some tests. Talk to us.
Mhm.
Send me a message on LinkedIn. Let's talk about it. But let's get you dialed into your brand voice. I do a brand voice workshop for free, like once every quarter or so. And one's coming up. But the point is that if you need to go out and figure it out, because if you can lean into what makes you unique and interesting, then you can bring that to the job. You can change the way that you do your job by putting these tools into place, but also adding something in that is your spice, that is your seasoning. And I think that's so, so important. That's why I talk about cooking, because
Mhm.
I guess I could talk about sports, but I'm not a sports person. So I talk about cooking.
When you get a recipe book, whatever it is, in my house, we have the big book of Jewish cooking, which is ancient and old and fantastic. And my wife is Japanese. So she married this Jewish guy. And, it's not like I have this like long history of only eating, ethnically Jewish food or food of my ancestors from Israel and Eastern Europe and so on. I do like me some hummus, but that's neither here nor there. Because frankly, the food of Eastern Europe is sometimes really awful. But we have this big book. Anyway, here she is, Japanese woman who is extremely focused on regimentation, on doing things the way they're written for the first time. So she takes the recipe, cooks it the way it is, and she's like, it's all salty, which is 100% true. Jewish food tends to be salty. So next time around, what she do? She cuts the salt, but not enough to make it flavorless, just enough to keep it flavorful. She's like, you know what? I cut the salt. Now I'm going to have to add something else to kind of counterbalance that. And then the recipe starts to take a slightly different shape. It's still the same food, but for some reason, her matzo balls are fluffier. Or for some reason, the kugel is sweet, but not like sickeningly sweet like you often get. I don't know if you know what kugel is. It's a noodle pudding, but it's noodles and cheese. It's fantastic. But hers is just delightful. And my mother, who's cooked this stuff all her life, is like, I can't believe this. I can't even, how does somebody who's never done this in their life just get it so right? Because they're taking great recipes and adding their own kind of spice to it, as you say. And it's a long way of saying that those of us who are creating all of these prompts, all these use cases, these recipe books, the grimoires, as Ethan Mollick likes to say, the spell books, I fully expect that somebody is going to just cut and paste what I've done from one of our use case libraries. They're going to cut and paste something. Oh, Dan did this one. It's about creating how to create a newsletter. All right, I'll try this one. But it's not going to work for them the way they want it to work for them. So they're going to have to tweak and play. And the way they're going to have to do that is by not taking anything for face value and asking lots of questions, at being a critical thinker and being curious and inquisitive. The core skill that communicators have, that a lot of marketers have too. I mean, it's the thing that makes us those imperfect humans, but it's also the kind of, the secret sauce in some ways of what you need to drive AI forward. So where I want to go with this, Kami, is basically like, what do you think then are, we've been talking all over the place really, but what do you think are like the key skills or elements that a professional in our industry needs, where no matter what level you're at, I suppose, or you can break it down, but that we'll need for the next 3-5 years, right? Not only to stay relevant, but to really be able to interact really well with the AI and get the most out of it.
Yeah, so I think that's amazing. That's a really good question, and it's exactly what we need to talk about. So number one is critical thinking skills. I would say that's number one, is like, you cannot take everything at face value anymore. And it's really important not to, for lots of reasons. AI can be deceptive, as we know, not on purpose, but it's just the way that it works. And you have to put it in line. Often when I see something that AI does wrong, I go back and tell the AI, no, it's not quite like that, is it now? And it will come back and it'll fix itself.
Terribly sorry.
So
terribly sorry.
Yeah, terribly sorry. Yeah, you're right. After looking at that again, you're completely correct. There is no such organization as that. So you have to be extremely critical in your thinking. And also, number two is, and it kind of goes with critical thinking, is you need to be ask better questions. I think we've already said this, but asking great questions. Questions are everything. And the reason I say that too is because, just like you said, if I took your recipe for a press release or whatever and put it in, and even if it worked perfectly, can you imagine what would happen if everybody started using that recipe? Then guess what? Every press release would be exactly the same, with exactly the same elements. And I shouldn't have used a press release, because that's actually been the case for eons, but or say a blog post or a newsletter article or whatever. It becomes so like monolithic and same. So you have to like think about that all the time. You were talking about your the big Jewish book of cooking. There's two things. Number one, I bought this huge book from Cooks Illustrated years ago it's a recipe book for food, and they have a test kitchen, and they go into the test kitchen and they test all the recipes, and inside of the recipes they tell us what they tested, how they tested it, why it works this way. They tell us about the times they failed. I love this book. By the way, I've been reading this book for I had it forever. So you can imagine when this came out, this is really kind of relevant. So I would say also step outside and have some life experiences and bring them back to the AI. So those life experiences help you a lot. So that'd be 3, right? Also, I was going to talk about my nanny. So my nanny, she passed away, unfortunately, about 17 years ago. But she made an amazing gumbo. Gumbo was her recipe. And we would wait to go to my nanny's house to eat the gumbo, right? To eat the gumbo. And before she died, she was like really like, I want to pass on all my recipes. So I have a book of recipes for my nanny. And in there's the gumbo recipe. And we sat down with her, like, what do you put in it? What do you do? She didn't have it written down. It was in her head. So we've put that whole recipe together. But guess what? The first time I made that, it did not taste like my nanny's gumbo.
Imagine that.
Because she puts a little more of this and a little more of that, like your wife, right? She has created that. Now, I think I've gotten slightly better at it, but it's just practice. So again, you need to take your recipe, add your little elements, and don't take it just for face value. And some of these tools are going to force you down a specific road. Like it's going to be this way or the highway. They've like put the AI in and it's like you push the button, like you said, and it comes out. The problem with that is that you cannot take that at face value and you need to add something in that is yours. So there's always the human element that must come in. I think the fourth, he had 4 principles, Ethan Mullock, and one of them was assume this is the worst AI you'll ever use. Yeah. And that's true because, the AI is getting better and better, but I also think it's some are going to, it's going to get worse sometimes. So what we've noticed, and as we've used the AI, is that every once in a while, the AI breaks down and it becomes really stupid for a while. Because they're changing things on the back end, right? They're moving servers, they're changing the way they're doing the cores. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes because this is like a super power hog. So you want to talk about ethics. I want to kind of get there. But this particular technology has a huge power load. So they're definitely trying to figure that out and moving the cores because there's these cores that they use on the AI on the back end. This is the geeky stuff you don't need to know about inside the box. But what happens is things shift around and it gets stupider. We also are talking about access to information. So AIs are voracious appetites. They have voracious appetites. They need new content to be relevant and good. And what happens after some time is that the model will break down if you don't put new information into it. I was talking about my fear of having like writing sweatshops, around the world where these poor people are all in a big building, like writing, original content to feed the lions, if you will. Right now they're doing it through partnerships with like, the Associated Press or the New York Times is about to do a partnership, I think.
Yeah, and we saw some the Atlantic and a couple of other big media organizations.
It's bubbling.
Yeah. So that's just the English language stuff, there's more.
Yeah, that's just English language. Oh yeah, so much more. And so I feel like because of that, we have a huge opportunity right now to understand that this is not like Google. Yeah, let me go back to that again. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily know what you're asking it. And so it may make huge mistakes because it has no knowledge about something. It may have no knowledge base about anything. So it can make huge mistakes that honestly cause all kinds of problems. So we have to realize how the technology works a little bit at least, and understand that this is a different animal than a Google search. Again,
people get really,
mindset,
people get really surprised. That's right. It's so important. People get really surprised when I tell them that the AI just wants to please you. Like it's not a Google. It doesn't want to give you an answer. It wants to give you an answer you like. And That's why it fills in the blanks.
Well, it wants to solve your problem.
Right. And that's why it'll fill in the blanks with stuff it doesn't know, because it's just putting patterns together that it thinks will match the pattern that you give it. It is a big pattern recognition machine. And those patterns are getting more and more complex, and the weightings and all this, getting the geeky stuff out there too. But still, that is why it fills in this weird, wacky information. If even in the early days, whatever, last 2 years ago, I was experimenting with uploading transcripts and creating meeting reports, which now you can do with one tool, right? But that wasn't as easily available at the time. So I would grab transcripts of meetings and I would upload them into, ChatGPT and have it analyze the meeting. And it was like totally like what ChatGPT came out in November of 22. So this must have been March of 23, like a couple months in. And, I gave it a 15-minute transcript. Perfect. I gave it a 35-minute transcript. And suddenly it's telling me, well, in 5 minutes in, Ken Lamb says blah, 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 blah. And then Doug says blah, blah, blah. And then Emily said this. Well, there was no Ken, there was no Doug, and there was no Emily. And it kept insisting. And I kept saying, no, listen again or read the transcript. You'll see that the first speaker is Troy. The second speaker is Dan. The third speaker is blah, blah. Oh, yes, I'm terribly sorry. That's right. I can see that now. So what happened? Well, Doug said something. Okay, there's no Doug, right? So I'm getting angry. That's what happened then. So now, of course, it's much better at these kind of bigger things, but not completely. It's not completely fixed. So yeah, you always have to be on your toes.
Critical thinking, number one, right?
Critical thinking, right? Just do not take anything at face value.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you to continue the list. Actually, there was something else, but we can wait because you did mention ethics, and I put a big circle about that. We'll get there. So we said so far, there's critical thinking, ask better questions, bring your life experiences. I don't know if that's so much a skill as just a kind of mindfulness necessity. Make sure that the more you know about the world, the better you're going to be with this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But what do you think about? Were there any more that you wanted to add to that list?
So critical thinking, ask better questions, bring personal experiences, and experiment, experimental mindset. So you're going to have to set aside some time for this. And I think it's hard for Marcom professionals to do that. It's hard for me to do that. I do think very critically about the tools I add to my tool belt because every tool you add takes extra time to learn, right? And to make sure you're using it well. So I would say be experimental, but like strategically experimental in the sense that in order to solve a problem, right? So I would say start trying to think of the problems you have and research ways that AI could possibly help you solve them.
I like that. I have a couple things to add to the list.
Sure, let's go. Let's do it. Let's build it together.
And these are things that everybody can and should do. And I'm sure you've heard this from your parents or your grandparents or whoever your guardians are. The first thing is read. Read a shit ton. Anything. Read anything. Hopefully read good things. That's subjective, but read. And then read news, I don't know about news. Get newsletters, read blogs, just read what other people are writing. Because you can only become a decent writer if you can read. But the other part of it is vocab, right? When you read, you learn words, those funky things that make meaning possible and that allow you to interact with. Those are the only that's your code. That's the code that you need to interact with the AI. You need words. You need the right words. And the change of a word changes everything. To say something, to tell the AI that you want it to think deeply or think carefully are two different things. So what are the differences? This is why you read. So read, get the vocab, get your SAT scores up, whatever you need to do, right? That's the first thing. These are very practical things. The second practical thing is writing, writing/editing, right? I would say either one. Being a good writer absolutely highly the most recommended thing that you could possibly be. But, it's a fact of life that a lot of people don't fancy themselves good writers, and they have issues with grammar or style, and they get into their own heads and they're like, oh, I'm not good enough. This is not true. Grammar isn't as important to AI. You just have to be able to put your thoughts down properly. And when I say be a good writer, I mean arrange your thoughts in such a way that it makes sense and it's clear. Be clear, be concrete, be crisp. And if you can do that, you can quibble over the little details after, but if you do those things, then you're in a good place. And then editing is the next level, where it should be, or you think you know what it should be, and then you can fix it. And you should edit yourself constantly as you're interacting with the AI. So those two things, are really critical. And I would just back up what you said about asking better questions.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn what those better questions are. You can learn how to ask better questions by, number one, reading, read interviews, read what people do about asking questions. There's certainly plenty of books on the topic of how to ask questions. If you're not a curious person, or if you don't think you're a curious person, there's certainly lots of questions. And there's always just your fundamental who, what, where, when, why, how. Who, what, when, where, why, how. In fact, if you only use that word and see what happens in AI, AI gives you an answer, just type in why, see what happens, right? How, and then go from there. So build your question skills one root word at a time, but build those skills. I would say, those are the main things that I would add. There's more, I'm sure. But did you have anything else?
I mean, there's so many more. No, I was just looking up something because I was trying to figure out exactly when. But I bought my first AI tool off of AppSumo. So I am a crazy person. I go into AppSumo, which is a marketplace for tools that, SaaS developers are trying to launch onto the marketplace and trying to get a bigger audience. So some of the first AI tools that I started to use were back in September 7th, 2021. I bought something called Word Hero, which is basically an AI tool. They were using the API, like the behind the scenes AI tools, and they were terrible, by the way. They just weren't very good at that point in time. And that was in 2021. So if you think we're in 2024 when we record this right now, how many light years ahead those tools are. But I started experimenting early, 2021, nobody was talking about this, nobody. So one of the things that you want to do is keep your eyes open for things that are coming along that you might be able to experiment with early on. That's number one. The other thing that you didn't mention was to experiment, which I think we did say, but experiment is really important.
Yeah,
and then
that one.
Number two which we haven't said is join a community.
Oh yeah.
So communities are great because a community of your peers are people that are like-minded. You help each other. You can't read everything. I do read so much that it's kind of hard. But the bottom line is I learned so much from you, Dan, and from, as you say, our Rise community and other communities that I'm involved in as well. I'm not just involved in Rise. I'm involved in about 4 communities that I'm very invested in different ways. No, I mean, they're different kinds of communities. Some of them are mine. Some of them are my communities.
I'm involved with Page Society. There's a lot of communities out there that are extremely valuable and important. I totally 100% agree.
Yes, but you want to do that.
Yeah, because this is not something you can do alone, and you're not in it alone. You are not in this alone. LinkedIn is in itself. You can argue that it's not a community because it's too many people, blah blah blah. But it's a great source of information from people who are like-minded and on the same path as you. So it's in some ways it meets some of the criteria. It's just that you're not as interactively connected with people, but not always.
The hive mind is really important. I mean, you don't want to get into an echo chamber or a place where you don't hear any differing points of view. But if you're trying to keep on top of a lot of different information like this, so if you really this is interesting to me, I'd love to get more into this. So I mean, join us in the Rise community. If you're a communicator, you'd fit in great there.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, there's ways that you can do this that don't take up all your mind space. So again, we're telling you to do a lot of things. That list got really long. But the truth is that number one, stay curious. I love that. Number two, think about this as a toolkit for you to solve the problems that you need to solve, and keep your mindset around that. And you'll see the answers to your problems in the different tools that you see in whatever.
Yeah.
Be experimental and really lean into a community.
I'd also, another thing that popped to mind is to keep in mind that, because something you said, to not take up all the mind space, this is not a zero-sum game. When you have a zero-sum game mentality, you will lose. It's not going to, nothing's going to work for you. You're going to run into problems, and you're going to, end up feeling victimized by the advent of these new technologies that are taking all your time away from other things. Everything that you do with AI, almost everything, can be overlap duplicative things that you can do that help you in other areas. So like when you read, I didn't say read all about AI, right? You're reading a business book, you're reading a teaching manual, you're reading a history book, a novel, whatever it is. That's going to help you with AI. Guess what? It's also going to not have anything to do with AI in the current time of day, and it's not taking your mind space in that way. So the kind of things that we're suggesting you do, apart from sitting down and experimenting with AI, are things that are, stuff you do anyway, or should be doing anyway.
For example, right now, I'm deep into healthcare. I've learned a lot about my brain, and how when you sleep, your brain is like a washing machine, and all your spinal fluid comes up into your brain. And I've into the eating habits. I'm, intermittent fasting, what that's all about. I spend a lot of time on things that have nothing to do with this, but you know what that does? It opens my mind to different ways about thinking. It doesn't matter what you're passionate about. Right?
10,000% agree with that. Every time you learn something new, you open up all kinds of new neural pathways. Reticular activating
system. How do you think I know about that?
I've had the wonderful Dr. Laura McHale on my show a couple episodes back, who is a neuroscientist for communications, and she's just, if I remember 15% of her book, that puts me in such an interesting place when I think about the way we process information, the way we communicate with one another from a neuroscience standpoint. And AI is one of those things. The way that you interact stimulates your brain in different ways, and understanding how that works is also another kind of, I think, very helpful point. I'm not saying go and learn neuroscience, but I'm not saying don't go and learn neuroscience, by the way.
And it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Let me just let me add into that. So I had a boyfriend way back in the day, before I was married, and he was a neural networker. So that was the beginnings of what became AI, right? So the neural networks were learning networks that were learning, and that's really what AI is anyway. It's a neural network. It's learning from itself, and so that was more than 30 years ago. So if you think about that, this is how long this technology has been cooking, but that is how it's based. It's based on the idea of the way that we learn, our brains learn. They were trying to duplicate our brain, and that's really what AI is. So I love that part of what it is learning for us too.
Yeah. And, it has a learning mindset. You might as well too. Speaking of communities and learning and all this kind of stuff, let's talk about ethics. How was that for a segue?
That's such a segue. Good job.
I did want to, I meant to get there. We have all these, these powerful digital entities that we're working with now. And again, I struggle to call it a technology, even though it's based in technologies. They're the wheel. They're the printing press. I think they're societally, and is that a word? Societal, political. They're just civilizational change. Brings with it a lot of baggage, and I know that a lot of your work is focused on doing this ethically, and I know that we're wrapping. It's terrible to give it such short shrift, but what are your thoughts now? We've heard a lot about ethics in AI, and I know that we can talk about deep fakes. Everybody understands this. What do you think are the big flags right now, or the things that we should be paying attention to from an ethical standpoint, from a danger standpoint with AI, especially with in light of the latest announcements?
Yeah, there's some new stuff that just come up. So I want to just start by saying AI isn't inherently evil, but the
Mhm.
people who wield it are maybe, so there's
Okay.
people that wield the AI. Here's the problem with AI in general. It's just like our society. Like we talk about, racism and bias and sexism and terrible things. Here's what AI does. It takes all of the knowledge of the world and it boils it down and it repeats it back to you. So if you take all of Reddit, all of these different places and you boil it down and you give it back to me, which they have,
Mhm.
um, there's going to be some biases in there because we are biased as humans. It's doing is reflect. It's like a big mirror. I always bring this out when
Yeah.
I'm talking to people. It's like a big mirror.
Ooh.
AI is a mirror to our.
Mhm.
I know you can't see that, people, but I have
But
a
it's a
mirror
mirror. And I've
here.
been
I
freaked
pull it
out.
out once. Pull it out once in a while. So AI is a mirror, and it's just reflecting back to you what it sees,
Mhm.
right? So we are, as a society, we need to train it. And so guess what? That means there's a lot of money and time that's going to have to go into training it. So on the micro level, we can train it.
Mhm.
So I have a couple of prompt words or prompts that I put in. They're really not big prompts. I put in CEO and secretary, and I put in doctor and nurse. And I've done it once every year. I talk about this in my presentation and I show you how things have shifted, not much, a
Mhm.
little, but not much. And so generally speaking, you can imagine what the AI thinks a CEO looks like and what it thinks a nurse looks like versus a doctor, or a secretary versus a CEO. And it is, as you exactly think, a white male, young, chiseled jaw, the CEO with a nice suit on, standing there like he's owning the world. And then there's the secretary, beautiful, young, beautiful hair, and usually scantily clad, sort of, but business scanty.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, same thing for nurses and doctors, really. Although this year, at least they had like the guy was one of them was a little bit like, balding and he
Mhm.
looked a little more geeky
What are you
than
using to do this?
usual.
Which tool, by the way?
I've been using Midjourney, but I put it
Midjourney.
in almost any other tool that I have
Mhm.
too, just to see what all the different tools do. So it would be good for you to have a bias prompt, is what I would call it,
Mhm.
for yourself, for whatever makes sense for your the world that you live in. So I would do a bias prompt and test it like
Mhm.
once or twice a year. And then, if you want the thing to be unbiased, you're going to have to create prompts that help it not be biased. You're
Yeah.
going to have to tell it what to do. And it is weird to have to do that. Like,
Mhm.
give me a diverse group of blah, blah, blah. And then they'll say, okay, here's diversity. It was all white men. Now it's like all white men and one white girl. I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of have to be, it almost sounds like racist and sexist yourself to get it to do what you want it to do. So that is going to be uncomfortable for you,
Mhm.
I think, generally speaking. But I think it's really, really important. Dove did a really great campaign around this. They've actually created the Real Beauty campaign has created a
Yeah.
prompting book to help you create more realistic characters. So you might want
Oh,
to grab that and put it in the show notes, or I can give you the link to it.
that'd be great.
But the Dove Real Beauty campaign is obviously always been about like trying to show beauty in different forms, like,
Mhm.
weight sizes and face types and ages. And they actually have put together an awesome prompting book to help you start with that. And so it's a recipe, a prompting. They don't call it that, but to me,
Yeah.
it's a recipe for how to create more, um, realistic characters. So that's on the prompting side for images, right? And then let's just go all the way into that. There's been a lot of case law around whether images have been stolen and so
Mhm.
forth. And what's ended up happening, as it always does, is these LLMs are starting to do business deals with different kinds of Shutterstocks and
Yeah.
different kinds of places. Okay, so the deals are starting to happen, but yes, a lot of these has been trained, because that's how you do an AI, right? You train
Mhm.
an AI, have been trained on scraped data from the internet, meaning I did not get your permission, but I mean, it's free to all, right? You can come to my website and
Mhm.
read all my stuff. And so people are starting to put robots on their sites that say, don't come and take my stuff. So you
Yeah.
can. there's like ways to do that. And that's going to happen. So I do feel like that there's going to be a need for novel stuff. And there's been a lot of things that have happened in the last few weeks. I don't know if you want to get that non-evergreen about this, but Sam Altman, who owns OpenAI, has been problematic. I mean, they tried to get rid of him as the CEO because he wasn't communicating with his board. And his board then said, hey, if you're not going to communicate with us, we're going to get rid of you. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, his team said, no, we won't stay unless he stays. And so guess what? They threw out the board. And now he's put together a new safety team that includes himself and people that work at OpenAI, and that's not going to work. You need outside people to make sure you're not doing, you don't see your blind spots. And I do think that absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's just human nature. And that's the thing we have to look at here too. I'm not saying that Sam Altman himself is corrupt. I don't even
know but there's fundamentally a problem. We've seen this in every single societal structure that has ever existed. There's fundamentally a problem when the person in charge is also the person in charge of policing the organization.
Right. And back in the day, we had ombudsman, for newspapers. And the ombudsman's job was to look at this thing from the community's point of view. And that is what I'm saying that we should be as communicators. I've said this for years. I have a blog post that goes back to 2008 or something that talks about we as PR communicators should be the ombudsman for our organizations. We should bring our point of view to protect the people that we represent as PR people. And the people we represent are our audience, are our customers.
Customers, yeah.
Our stakeholders. I mean, yeah. So that's just the bottom line. I feel like that has not changed.
No.
And it becomes even more important now. So I think from the ethical point of view, that is our job as communicators, is to say, okay, we're using this, and here's the things we're going to put into order. PRSA has a really good look at this from the point of view of the code of ethics for PRSA. So that's another link I can give you to put in your show notes. But the code of ethics have given you some ways to think about each of the ethics in light of AI and how you're using it. So I just think those things are important.
I agree. And Anne Green, she's the CEO of GNS Business Communications. GNS Strategic Business Communications. I'm going to get that wrong. I'm sorry, Anne. But Anne was on the show a couple of weeks back, and she's very involved in ethics, the ethics for our profession, and now ethics for AI. I hear a lot about it, and of course, being a practitioner and somebody who uses AI all the time, my approach is always be transparent about what you're doing. Make sure that people know that you're using AI, even if it's an image. I generate images for our company newsletter, for example, that we post to LinkedIn. And I insist that there's a caption under the newsletter that says AI image generated by Midjourney. You just have to put it out there. And I also insist that the image cannot be in the style of any particular painter or somebody who's famous, and even though you can't guarantee that there won't be an element in there of something, I mean, I'm pretty sure that we're in a good place. But more than that, I'm absolutely sure I'm not intending or trying to steal anything, and I'm not doing anything I'm not putting anything out there that's controversial.
Do no evil.
Do no evil. I mean, and the rules that govern AI ethics are basically the same rules that should govern ethics, period. You need good governance. You need to use common sense a lot, but you need to understand that, when you put something out there that you're misrepresenting, you're doing something that is terribly wrong. It may not be illegal, Zuck, but it's certainly wrong. I mean, there's a lot to this, and I think we have a long way to go. I don't even understand why there was ever a question about what are the ethics of doing a video of Kami of digital avatar Kami in AI that sounds and looks exactly like Kami and that speaks like Kami, and we can just use her to do a commercial. What are the ethics of that? Why are you asking that question? That's clearly unethical. Unless Kami says, go ahead and do it. I love this. Please do this for me. That's the only thing that makes it ethical. It astounds me sometimes. And I suppose that there are people in the world who have little experience or have been, somewhat corrupted by TikTok, and I'm not a fan. Have very different views of what constitutes the acceptable behavior. And I think that that's a learning that has to happen. If you think about the transformation we talked about earlier on about new entrants into the profession, what's their transformation challenge going to be? Maybe this is it. Maybe it's the transformation of no ethics to ethics. Maybe it's okay if and hopefully when TikTok closes down. And yes, I could be on the record as saying I don't like TikTok and I want it gone. And not for any political reasons. It's just because I think it's terrible and evil. Having seen teenage girls go through this whole thing, the transformation from, okay, TikTok's no longer available to us. How do we do content now? What do we do with all those videos? What do we do with all this stuff? That's a type of transformation in and of itself, because it's billions and billions and billions of bytes of data right there. So get off my soapbox now. I'm sorry. Ethics is it's certainly a critical core issue. And our profession should be the safeguards of this. I agree with you. We should be the ombudsman. They're very important.
Yeah, I agree. And as far as TikTok goes, I don't 100% agree with you. I do, and I don't, because there's just a lot of people that have built their livelihoods on there. And I've seen some positive things too. People that have made their music careers, and even in my own teenagers. But there is a great opportunity for evil on many platforms. And everywhere. I've seen it on many platforms. And so we have so many things that we are not doing 100% well, because the technology moves so much faster than we can even really understand, especially in the legislation of the platform. So the fact that they move so quickly on the legislation for this, I don't know if they're going to do away with TikTok per se, but I think that the process of this will change it in some way, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, I think those kinds of changes or those kinds of constraints on technology are so important. And AI is like absolutely that way. I've been talking about this the whole time. I talked about it in social media back in the day. I talked about have guardrails. I always showed a picture of a road with like the guardrails on the side, because you have to have guardrails on the way that you use this technology. So I love that. The governance is so important for your brand. And for the country, I mean, for any country, the European Union is doing so much better at this than we are, as far as like putting some guidelines in there. And I actually really want to thank them directly because it's actually making it better here as well. Those guidelines have helped us.
Well, we're forced, especially if you're in a global company, you have to stick to those guidelines. And I mean, everything comes with pros and cons, but on the whole, I think, we as humans, and we as the imperfect human in the mix, the flaw in the diamond, we also have the capability of finding those flaws and identifying those flaws. And like knows like, right? And that's why we need to be on guard for ethics. We can create as many GPTs as we want to kind of analyze things for ethical concerns, but ultimately, an algorithm is not ethical. An AI is not ethical. The people behind it are the ones that are injecting it with whatever demonstration of morality and ethics that it has. That's why we really need to be on guard. And this is going to be an ongoing discussion. And there's always going to be this boundary zone, this gray area where we can say, oh, we should allow that or we shouldn't allow that. But, we don't need to function in that zone. We're usually not functioning in that zone most days. Like 90% of the time, 95% of the time. I mean, I'm sure there are people whose job is completely in the gray zone, fine. But for the most part, those of us who function in our day-to-day life, serving our clients, working for our corporations, doing the things we do, we are not anywhere near the gray zone of ethics. So the decisions that we make should be very clear. Don't copy shit. Don't claim things that aren't your own. And don't misrepresent your company. Don't do things without people's permission. There's a long list of don'ts, and do the right thing. Be respectful. These
and I think the don't be evil is like such a
don't
great,
be evil.
It
sure
like
is.
top line of it. Of course, now what you define as evil is interesting, but don't be evil. Like, don't be evil. I think that's really important for communicators. We have to be careful. And by the way, part of it is like actually standing up to your executives sometimes, because I've had executives ask me for things. I'm like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
No, absolutely you can't do that. And here's why you can't do that. Here is going to be the effect of you doing that. By doing that, yeah, it's a shortcut. It's great for us in the short run. But like, here's the cost, the potential cost of that. And I always talked about this, like, the Arthur Page is a really good example of that. We were doing some talking about that beforehand, is that Arthur Page had principles, the 7 principles of Arthur Page. And, I say but the first principle is grow a backbone. You have to have a backbone to get those principles into place. And so that's really, really important. Like, as a communicator, we have to grow a backbone, which often means, are we making ourselves unpromotable? Are we making ourselves, be less of likely to succeed in a corporate environment? I mean, it could be.
Yeah.
And so it takes some courage. It takes some uncommon courage to be ethical in this way.
That is a huge topic to discuss. And sometimes I do feel like an invertebrate. I lose my backbone. Yes, sir. So I'll do whatever you say. But I, over time and experience, I realized that there's a lot more harm or a lot more self-harm in not expressing your concern than in expressing your concern. I'd rather be labeled on occasion, and this is never me, by the way. I mean, but I would rather be labeled the cynic or the difficult one, difficult than a pushover or than the yes man. I mean, or the yes person. It's a big decision to go. It's a big decision to express an opinion of any kind these days, but it's a really big decision to express a contravening opinion or a forceful kind of thought that this is wrong or this is not going to go the way you think it goes. Speaking of this is wrong and not going the way we think it is, that is absolutely not the description of this show. It has been fantastic, but I think keeping people on for much longer could fall under the definition of evil. So I don't want to do any evil anymore. I want to make sure people get on their way, and because I could keep talking to Kami for hours, as you can see. And I mean, normally I ask like, what keeps you up at night? We've talked about that. We've talked about the ethical concerns of AI. We've gone through a lot of really fascinating information about skills that we need. I had this beautiful and brilliant plan to go through a list of tools and come out, and you guys could have, the listeners out there could have this, stop and keep taking notes about, I need to get this one, I need to get that one. But you know what? I'll ask Kami for a resource and we can attach it to the notes or something. Because believe you me, whenever I need to think about, okay, what tools should I be using, I kind of check out what Kami's doing, and that helps.
I've got my AI recipe book. It's like I can send you my AI recipe link.
Oh, that'd be terrific.
It's really, yeah,
that would be terrific. But in the meantime, I suggest that everybody out there connect with Kami when you get a chance. And having lived in Japan for such a long time, when I first saw her name, I thought it was Kami, because Kami is Kami in Japanese, but it's Kami and Huyse. It's a Dutch last name. I will spell it properly in the episode title, so you'll know how to find her on LinkedIn. It's Kami. On LinkedIn, it's Kami Watson Huyse, and you'll find her pretty easily. Or just go to kamichat.com, which is probably the easiest solution. Check out kamichat.com. It's her all of her links are there on one page. You can find her. That's how you can get to LinkedIn, and it's 2 clicks instead of 1, but go for it. At KamiChat on most of the socials, KAMICHAT, and ZoeticaMedia.com for her company. And check it out. It's all incredibly important things, and buy the most amazing marketing book ever if you want to see some of her writing and mine, almost side by side. So, Kami, did I miss any of that? Did I miss any of your socials?
No, you did great. And KamiChat is a great place to go, kamichat.com, because at the very top is also the AI recipe, just PS.
Oh, beautiful. There you go.
So
There it is.
it's a list of links where you can find me in all the places. I do a live stream on Thursdays that really is all around social media and communications and how to and AI. I'm actually doing a AI show once a month called AI Smart Sparks,
Ooh,
and so I'm excited about that. So that's something new, and yeah, that's coming along. So yeah, come find me. I would really love to talk to you. I'm in all the socials wherever you are. I am too.
terrific. And definitely do that. Clearly Kami is somebody you want to connect with. And you heard it here, folks, on the Trending Communicator, a certainly trending person, Kami Huyse. Thank you so much, Kami. I really appreciate your time. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to the Trending Communicator.